All right, guys, so we're going to fly through this one. I've had a couple of guys ask me how I'd process this to become a game model. And it really depends on what kind of game model you're creating. Is it low poly for like mobile, or is it next generation for Unreal Engine 5 Nanite? That's really kind of the question that you got to ask yourself. How much detail does it actually need? And what do you need to get rid of in order to meet triangle counts, perhaps, or texture limits and all that other fun stuff? So this model as it is right now could be worked a little bit more and become a mid-poly models, similar to what you would see in something like Cyberpunk, or you could do a high to low poly bake. And so we're going to do high to low in this one, but any number of ways you can go with this thing. Even high to low, this is more or less kind of done in a way. So if you duplicate like the base here, it's all been Boolean union together, and pull it out. You have to go through and clean it up a little bit at least. And you'll see there's just things that don't line up, like vertices kind of mismatched and whatnot. So we would want to go through and process these things and control the triangulation of the model a little bit. Sometimes you do like random little cuts like that. It helps control that triangulation. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'll turn the triangulate modifier on. I'll turn it off in edit mode. Check keep normals. And let's add a weighted normal modifier as well. Send it above and turn on the face influence. Right, so you can see cutting that line out makes these fan out to this point here. Not that you have to do that, but you would get a dramatically different kind of triangular result there. And sometimes you don't want things like that. So this area is not too bad. Some of these could definitely be shifted around a little bit. I distort the mesh usually in cases like this, just a tiny bit. It's not really the end of the world. It's kind of a quality versus time constraint, basically. Like, what can you get away with as a cheap trick as opposed to doing everything proper? I mean, if you're working on a large set or environment pieces, you got to do a bunch of different things. You're not going to spend all the time in the world processing every asset to its best possible ability. There's be time considerations as well. So some things you can select more, select boundary loops, Control X, dissolve that in there. You can see we have a little issue here. Pull those out. I don't think I need those extra edges in there. Doesn't seem to help much. So you would want to set kind of a certain amount of edges for your bevels. Maybe smaller ones end up being, 2 segments or 3 segments like that. And you can go through and just dissolve a couple things here or there. Now reduce the triangle count, right? Don't forget, when you're creating game models, there's a good odd chance you're going to do a LOD 0 and a LOD 1 model. So you're going to want to leave some things there that you can still possibly go over later. So I'd cursor select that and checker deselect it. I'm going to get rid of these and then this one. And you can try to balance that out a bit. But you might want to leave additional edges so that you can work it down a little bit if needed. This one's going to be tricky. So, let's try it again. Checker deselect. Select loops. And all these selection methods are up here. If you hear me using a selection method, there's like edge loops, boundary loops, rings, inner loop regions, all that fun stuff. All right. Just going to dissolve those as is. Doesn't have to be perfect necessarily. And right. So you see this thin edge? You don't want thin edges like that usually. So I'm going to merge it to there, and we'll just G twice those out like that for now. Remember, game models, static meshes, at the end of the day, they're triangulated meshes for the most part. They don't animate. They don't need to be quads. There's no need to even do that necessarily. You just have to go through and make the appropriate decisions when you're calling things out. I'll leave that outer one there. I'm just going to think about dissolving that one. No, we'll leave it. I'm going to try set flow on these ones. It's an add-on that you can download. A lot of times it helps out on some things like that. This is why you want to do certain bevel segments as well. I've talked about that on the channel. You want to do like 2 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s. And that's so that you don't run into the situation where you don't have a center edge, basically, that you Can get rid of also things like this. You might slide them a little before you dissolve the other one, right? Just balance it out. So a little bit of process work, right? And it's really not that bad. I mean, it's fairly fast. Once you get used to doing this, it's not like the end of the world. Joining that to there won't really make a huge difference, but it just seems like a good thing to do. All right, now, so we've got this all kind of going. Let's shade it auto smooth and bump it to 180. Okay, we'll turn off that triangulate for just a second. And we can see the shading breaks apart, right? So in Blender 4.2, you could do smooth by angles and apply the modifier. It will probably mark everything at 30 degrees. Otherwise, when you're in edit mode, you can go to the edge menu and there's mark sharp by angle in 4.2. Here in Blender 3.6, what we're going to do is just use select sharp edges and make sure we're in edge selection to use this correctly. So press 2, do by 30 degrees, Control E, and then mark sharps. Okay, so we're going to correct the shading first before we move on to doing UV maps. But you can see there's things that didn't get marked that should be. And so we'll go through real quick and mark, whoop, wrong one. Mark some of these as sharps. Going to fix up that shading just a little bit there in those cases. And usually if it shades badly, it means you don't have enough geometry or you'll have to use a sharp edge somewhere, maybe rework the topology a bit, but you can see it should look something like so with hard edges. So reason you want to do this, found it works out pretty well, but if you try to bevel everything, it might become problematic. You'll see how it plays out here in just a second, but kind of scanning it, glossing it over real quick. Let's take a look at this real quick. Yeah, so there's a lot of excess in here that we probably don't need. And so we could probably work some of that out. Maybe I'll leave that one. Something going on in there. It's like an edge, but I can't select. Oh, okay. His back faces or something. All right, so you can alt middle click, by the way, to get around like this. That's like the easiest way to do that. And you can see we're pretty much there. We're getting there anyways. All right, with that out of the way, some things you may not want to mark sharp at all, even if it did it by angle. Clear sharp here, and you'll see we get shading issues. So when you're using the weighted normal modifier, check face influence. Some faces you can get away with pressing Alt-N, set face strength to something like strong. They're all medium by default, or yeah, medium. And so if we set that strong, you'll see the shading there kind of changed around a little bit. Still doesn't look perfect, but you know, it's kind of a speed thing here if you're trying to go for that. So once again, like portfolio work, you might want to do everything proper 100%, but when you're doing things like this that are just for actual putting it into a game, you might take a lot of shortcuts and do some cheats and tricks. This is a problem here. You see how this is like lipping up like this? So this is when I did the bevel on that cube that I use as a cutter there. It was a problem. I'm going to duplicate this edge real quick. So Shift D and then hit P and separate selection. We're going to grab that edge again. I'm going to turn on vertex snapping to make a shape. So I can just press E, Y, or EX, hold Control, snap to here. So I can grab these two, press F, press A, F. We create a face. I can extrude it out if needed. I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll try. Alt-N, recalculate it outside. I'm going to do a destructive Boolean subtraction. So I can chisel that all away like that. Using Bool Tools, Control-Shift-B. That's the Bool Tools menu. I used Auto Boolean Difference, so it's a destructive Boolean. Shade it Auto Smooth again, see what happens. See if we can't work some of these things out here that might have got messed up in that process. So some of these are not sharp anymore. That might need to be sharp. Oh, let's try that again. I don't know why it moved on me, but it did. And I'm not sure where the sharp got lost in there. Apparently there's a sharp missing now somewhere. Or something's going on. I'm going to dissolve those for a second and attach here to there with J. I'm going to dissolve all that. See if I can't do something different over here as well. That's a real risk you run sometimes when you're working on things. You might not know exactly what happened or why. Some kind of shading going on somewhere. I haven't seen it yet. Maybe you have by now. I don't know. It can happen. Okay, let's fix this up here too while we're at it. And just going to push that one forward. It's GG twice back a little bit and hold Alt. Just bring it forward. Or, you know what? Actually, just GG twice forward. Whoa, what's the wrong one? Pull that one down there. Actually, let's pull this one, that one. Oh, that didn't work out. Let's dissolve that edge. I don't want to, but I feel like I need to. Because it shouldn't be set up like that. Still got to figure out what's going on in the other piece over there. We'll slide that one that way. Yeah, it's getting pretty bad in this area, so we definitely got to do some work here, huh? I think I'm going to just shift these around, even though it's not like the greatest. We'll probably get away with that. All right. And we'll pull that one to there. Now, where is this shading losing its mind at? That's the question. It's like a double or triple or something going on. Let's join there. No, that's not it. All right. Let's join there to there. I'm trying to isolate little areas, hoping that it'll work itself out, but it looks like something over here might be the problem too. Like I can't dissolve that edge for some reason. That's kind of a dead giveaway. Something's going on there. But I don't see it yet. It's just not a thing. Let's Alt Z and see if there's something inside here. Let's do a join to here, see if that isolates anything. It does not. All right, so what happened? Did I apply the weighted normal? Oh, I did. There you go. That's what happened. I applied it apparently when I did the Boolean. When you use a destructive Boolean, it applies your modifiers. I did not even recognize that I did that. So like if we shade it auto smooth at 180, it's fine. And that's why we don't see any issues. Because you got to go to geometry tab, your object data or data properties or whatever, and remove the custom normal. Weighted normals become custom normals. And you can see this area just looks terrible. So there's not a sharp here. All right. So now we still got some, from this angle, it looks kind of bad, but it's actually not too bad. So, all right. Sometimes we'll run into issues like that. That's how you solve it. So you look around, if you don't see an issue, it's something else maybe, right? That's kind of the way it goes. Right, yeah, so we got it all pretty much laid out. This is what we want to do. Every edge that's sharp, you're going to mark it as a seam. So you select one sharp edge, hit Shift-G, select by sharpness, Control-E, and mark seams. So they all become seams. All sharp edges get seams. Not all seams need to be sharp, okay? So now we can go back through here, and we can find little sections like this, potentially. We can mark seams in these areas as well, if needed. And this is so we can straighten them out if needed, but you don't have to straighten everything out necessarily. If you want to leave them as circles in the UV map, that's fine. But I'm just going to do it like that for speed purposes, but you sometimes don't want to do that, just so you know. Okay. So I'm just going to split those cylinders so they'll unwrap. A lot of them will unwrap even if you don't split them, so just keep that in mind. Up here, I am going to Alt N, set face strength as strong on this one. Hopefully that helps. Add that weighted normal back. You probably won't see the effect if the face strength made any effect anyways. You probably won't see it now, but I'm going to dissolve those. I'm going to make that sharp and make it a seam as well. There's no way to visualize sharps and seams at the same time, like turning one off and not the other. So at least I don't think there is. Oh, you know what? There might actually be. Yeah, you can. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I don't usually use that, but yeah, if you need to, there it is. You saw it. It's up there in that drop-down menu on the top right, right? All right, so we got to split some things up because if these are our seams, if we press L, these are our islands if we select by seam. So press L, select seam, and you can see this is a big island with holes in it, and it loops around on itself. This will not likely unwrap very well. Let's just try it, see what it does if we unwrap. You can see it goes crazy like this. Now, if we were to do conformal, it might turn out better, but even then it might turn out kind of crappy. Try turning Phil's holes off and see if that makes a difference. And it doesn't. So yeah, bigger islands are, in my opinion, sometimes better, but not always. And so you just got to kind of pick and choose your battles on these things sometimes. And also, you know, merge things if you want, you know, even if you're shifting the shapes of cylinders, sometimes it's not a bad deal. But in our case here, you see that went crazy. We lost a sharp in there. Okay, so mark sharp, and then we can get that back. Now, we're going to mark a seam. We're not doing sharps on this one, though. Okay. It's my little pie menu add-on that I got a long time ago that isn't supported no more, but not that one. Maybe this one. Usually the extent, the last one is the one you want. Right, so we go through, we find what we need as far as where we might want some seams anyways. This one's interesting. We could merge it down. Go full screen so you guys can see it a little better. Control spacebar to do that, by the way. All right, and let's do a seam there. Sometimes you get away with seams on those. We're going to need them on this big piece up here. So let's go to the UV editor, press U, unwrap. And we'll see something like this. Use conformal, turn fill holes off. Fill holes absolutely will distort things sometimes. Not always, but it will. So we do this number like this. We can see a number of things in here that are being set up now. And you get the text tools add-on, for real. This is the best thing ever. Because when you have quad strips like this, you can just rectify them usually. Done. When you want to straighten something out, you can go and grab it and hit straighten, you see? And so it's freaking fantastic with those tools alone. Vanilla Blender's UV unwrapping tools, just like, there's ways of doing stuff like this, usually, with the vanilla tools, but it's so beyond, like, user-friendly to do all these stupid workarounds. So just get an add-on like this. Blender becomes infinitely better when it has add-ons. By default, the regular tools, while you can use them and you can make things with them, it's just really a kind of a waste of time trying to find all these workarounds and do all this nonsense. You just get tools that work to do what you need it to do. And as a beginner, you don't always know what you need it to do, right? That's the biggest problem. And so my only little tip or advice here to you is that when you get used to working in other software first, like Max or Maya, and you come over to Blender, there's a lot of things that are just missing. Like, they're literally just missing. They don't exist in Blender. And it makes it so hard to transition from those softwares to this one, because you don't realize that you need add-ons for Blender. Like, you absolutely need them. It's not a question of if. Specifically for modeling. Like, otherwise you're just going to be wasting lots and lots of time. And some things, like when you try to rectify these, like you see here, like this was just working fine on everything, but I rectify this one. Oh, it had shrunk down for some reason and did something kind of weird. And now it went normal this time. I don't understand sometimes. I think you have to use face or island selection or something in order to get some of these to work. This should also, you see, like if we rectify that, it splits it. So if it's not quads, it'll split. But this one was split already, so we should be able to straighten it. Remove 3 vertices. No, I'm not trying to remove 3 vertices. This, well, anyways. It should unwrap or unravel, I think. I thought I marked it with seams, but I guess I did not. Maybe I didn't. Yeah, so we're looking for these ones, basically. So before you go crazy doing all this, it'd be really nice to just ensure that all your stuff is working as expected. Check it with a checker map if you needed to. Very easy. Just add a material, base color, click, new image texture, new texture, set it to something like click and drag down in 2048. You can call it checker if you want. You can change it from blank to a color grid or a UV grid. It's up to you. We'll use UV grid and click OK. Go Z material preview. We can look at our checker grid now and just take a look at it. And yep, so if it looks good, there's no distortions, then we should be okay. We're looking to make sure they're just squares for the most part. Sometimes they might rotate and sometimes it might have little slight distortions. Don't get too worked up over it. It's not really worth it usually. Just trying to make sure it's well enough. And so this should be how fast it kind of goes as well. Like you should be kind of flying through these things. And if you don't want to see the checker grid in the background, you can exit and just do that. Okay, as long as it's a square texture, you're fine. So we can go through this, go to Pack Master. Oh, we can use a regular packer as well. Pack Islands. Once you straighten everything out, use cardinal so it doesn't rotate at weird degrees. You can set the margin up to whatever you want it to be. So if I want to set it up to like usually I try like 0.06 to 0.2, somewhere in there. It seems to work well. You can see 0.06 is way too much right now. So we're going to pack islands and we're going to do, take that back at 0.006 is the one, not 0.6. 0.006 or 0.2. Okay, because this might be too close still. It's actually not bad. I think you could get away with using that. There's an add-on called Texel Density Checker. If we select everything and press K or calculate texel density, our density won't make sense right now because it's not scaled appropriately. It has to do with the texture resolution, the size of the object, and how efficient the UVs are on the UV map, right? Or the islands are. And you can see here our efficiency is at 47%, right? And so if this is a 4K texture, it'll act like you're using a 2K texture. If you're using a 2K texture, it'll be the equivalent of using a 1024 or 1K, right? So the more efficient you are, the better. Because this is not going to cut it, maybe. This is why I use Packmaster, personally, for things like this. I can go in here, I can set pixel margin, I can set the resolution to whatever I want. So if I'm going to use a 2K, 2K should have a pixel margin of 16. 4K would be 32, and a 1K would be 8, right? So 16 for this one. Heuristic search, advanced heuristics. We want to pre-disable rotation to 90 degrees. And we can pack this. This little integer down here, 0.6, that's the efficiency right now. It's at 60%. Right? So it's already more efficient than what we had. And it's going to sit here and try to calculate it or figure it out for a bit. It probably won't go much higher, though, to be honest. These kinds of shapes like this, they tend to stay pretty low. And so if that's a problem, usually if you can use any kind of overlapping UVs or breaking it into multiple textures, perhaps texture sets, instead of just using one UV, use 2 UV islands. Anyways, things like that you can do, or material blending as well. There's different techniques to achieve a low poly model. In our case, I think we'd be okay with this. This would probably be like one prop of many, more than likely. So depending on its scale, like if this is something really small, or if this is like the size of a vehicle, we would want to use material layers probably, or trim sheets or seamless textures or something, right? Anyways, so we got it set up. That's great. Now I'm going to duplicate it And we'll get rid of that weighted normal real quick. We'll pop it out over here. This base shape, it's all Ngons right now. We absolutely need that triangulate modifier. You're going to add this, keep normals, and just set it like that for now. This is going to be our object underscore low. This is going to become our object underscore high. They have the same origin point, so I'm okay to move it right now because I duplicated it basically. But what I wanted to show you was if we go to, let me change the matte cap real quick. We go to sculpt mode, face sets, initialize face sets by normals. You can shift and click and drag at the same time. Hold shift and click drag. You want to split this up into face sets. That makes sense to break up everything. Sometimes you'll want to grow or shrink these things or combine them together. That's a possibility, but you can see here, like we do want to make face sets that are going to help us smooth this thing down potentially. Okay. Like the side of your cylinders, you want separated like this. Okay. But you can use edit face sets to grow or shrink. So we'll grow that one. If we grow this one, it does the whole background. So I don't know if that helps us much, but this edge here, I really want to select as, oh, actually I don't want it like that at all. It doesn't matter on this one, but the low poly, we might want to change that because that little thin strip of faces, this is really bad for textures usually. You want to keep them connected. That little seam, that little UV island, right? But we could take this whole section here, maybe get a hold of it, go to the edit mode or sculpt mode, and then do set face set from edit mode selection. We can do things like that. So having a good simplified mesh like this can be really useful for setting up the face sets. But for the most part, it should be getting broken up into little sections and subsections. And, you know, like you can use the regular face set tool. It's a little weird to use this, but you hold control, you click and drag and paint over the center points of these faces. Sometimes the center point's not in the center. It's actually kind of off to the side in weird areas. But so you just got to play around with this for a bit. So what we're doing is we're setting this up so that we can basically smooth it if needed. Similar to how you would work in ZBrush. So a lot of people look at this technique and they're like, oh, this is ridiculous. How would you ever use this for an actual game model? This is the same process as if you would do in ZBrush. The only difference is I want this to be a face set. There you go. And that needs to be a face set. Okay, so there's a little center point somewhere in there. I had to try to figure out where it was. But yeah, this is basically the same idea as working in ZBrush, except we don't have as good of a remesher perhaps, right? We're going to have to spend some time trying to do this just right, perhaps. It's not the end of the world, but let's select all that real quick. Alt F was the shortcut to do that, right? It's a little faster using shortcuts. Because we do want to go through here and select some things and assign them like so. I've missed a number of things. I'm sure I've missed things I don't even see yet that should probably be worked out. Like even something like these in here would probably be nice to keep separated. And a lot of times you want to have them individual so you don't do all of them at the same time. Right. All right. So the whole reason I wanted to go through this is that you have two options with a Boolean Ngon model. Option one, you model it kind of fast like I did on this thing where you have a decent amount of segments for your bevels. It works okay if you're going to go back and remesh it and smooth it like we're about to. Option two is you do more non-destructive modeling where you keep booleans, or excuse me, you keep bevels and shapes where they're non-destructive and they're editable. Meaning you use like for a cylinder, you use a screw modifier and a profile of the shape of the cylinder to make a non-destructive cylinder, right? You might leave bevels or use like bevel modifiers with weights or vertex groups or by angle and set everything up in a way that you can modify the segment counts on your bevels or your cylinders or your spheres, right? So then what you can do is you can create a low poly and a high poly virtually at the same time, or at least a smoother version of that mesh that you could take into, you could remesh and not have to do as much smoothing stuff like this perhaps, right? All right, well, we're doing it this way, but remesh, fix poles, press R. So usually you go pretty low with these numbers. I'm going to try to hit 0.8, I think. But a lot of times I'll go down to like 0.2, 0.4, 0.1 even. It depends on the object. But it gets so dense it would actually be hard to record while doing it. But I'm going to hit Control R at 0.008. That should be 8 millimeter. Okay. Depending on how big your object is, you might need to go... like you can only go down so far with a remesh, right? So you might need to increase the size of your object so that you can reach a smaller number. If it's and so you apply your scales and upscale your stuff, I guess. But you'll see here, perfect results. No, it's not very dense at all, actually. Let's try, we'll go down a little bit further to like 0.06, 6 millimeter. So for every little quad thing it made before, we're going to be doing basically not quite another one, but it's going to be pretty dense. I'll put it that way. Yeah, 2 million. Yeah, so I take these up to usually like 4 million. Between 4 to 8 million works well, but sometimes I'll go up to like 10, 12, things like that. So it just depends on the object. The more faces, not always the better. It actually becomes a little bit hard to decimate these later on if you do that. So, but for now, I think this is fun. And so what we're going to do is use mesh filter, set it to smooth, and we're going to auto mask face set boundaries and face sets. Now you have an option here that you can do. You can click and drag to the right and start to smooth things out like this. You can see it gets a little bit slow in performance. I like to isolate things by hitting H over them, or shift, or you can hit Shift H or whatever, or H again to unhide. But I feel like it allows you to smooth a little bit faster when you do that. It's not as laggy feeling. Anyway, so if you want to do that, do that. But you can smooth all these out pretty much for the most part. Relatively fast even. A very destructive way of working, but it does work. And that's kind of the main key there. But you can see where having more faces on these cylindrical shapes and bevels would also benefit us. Like right now, we're going to get some kind of like little choppy corners here still. We'll smooth them down a bit, but they don't really fully go away. But for the most part, depending on what you're working on, it doesn't really matter. If you're going for speed and you're just trying to get a bunch of props done for an environment or something, it's not that big of a deal. You can see like some things need a lot of smoothing apparently. I guess I messed this back section up and I didn't realize it. So you do want to be careful with your triangles when you're doing those reductions. It can definitely could cause problems, right? I think that one will actually work out by the end of this, but for now, I'm just going to smooth it somewhat heavy. And there you go. Did we get all of it, or is that it? Or did we miss anything? We missed that one. You see how the face set isn't here at the front on this top rim? That's a little bit of a problem. Once you set those face sets, you're kind of stuck in stone with them. Like you can't really get a good selection of these face sets later on. Like you could try, but it just doesn't work out well. You can see I missed this side apparently. You can see it a little slower trying to do it without pressing H for some reason. Performance-wise, I guess it's just more draw or something. I don't know. All right. Thought I did this, but I guess I did not. Last but not least, was that it? Or are we done? Did we get through it all? Oh, not that one. If you go too far, it will cause problems. It will cause it to start to collapse inwards. It'll look like it's creating a concave like cavity almost, or bow to the surface. You'll find it when it happens. It's really easy to spot. So we'll try to demo that. Let's do this one again. I don't think it's quite enough. Okay. Yeah, you do want to get them all worked out for the most part all the way. Doing it a couple times might help. All right, there you go. A little bit of manual work. I think it works out better this way than just using a straight remesh with the modifiers. You don't have the opportunity to change the values here, but it's definitely way more performant in my opinion, even though it's destructive. Like you're not sitting here waiting for that modifier to calculate, recalculate, and calculate and recalculate. You know what I'm saying? Where you do it multiple times over. If you've ever used that technique, anyways. Yeah, so this thing's only going to look as good as you make it, basically. So if you want to spend more time going through here and sculpting, you can. And that's what we're just going to mention anyways. We're not going to do it, but you can sculpt on this. You can use things like the scrape tool, and you turn auto masking off. You can scrape on edges. You can do stuff like this if you want still. Okay. If you want to use hard surface alphas, you want to start laying out really complicated looking trims and whatnot. Just keep in mind, this isn't a multi-resolution sculpt, so you don't have no eraser. Like you can't just go back and get rid of stuff. You got to get it right the first time, and then you're stuck in stone when it happens usually. Unless you know how to fix it with the sculpt tools, maybe. Anyway, so once we go through that whole process, I'm just going to use a smooth modifier. And I'm just going to smooth it. However many times you think is useful for you. If it looks a little bit soft, maybe you don't smooth it as much, but you do need to smooth it quite a bit in order to work out these edges. These edges, they don't ever really go away fully. They kind of always stay like that. Even if you remeshed it, it would still be there like that. So the solution to that problem, the best I found anyways, is that if you just use a higher density mesh and just smooth more, it tends to work it out better. Okay. It doesn't make it perfect, but it does work it out better. And so you want to use this kind of in specific, maybe situations where, like when you're working nice bevel geometry would also work really well if you're at a high enough resolution. But then you run into an issue with the face sets, right? Like there's hit the wrong way, went to edit mode. Whoops. When you're working with those face sets though, and I guess the smooth modifier is on, so it causes problems. Like when you want things to remain sharp in those corners, like face sets is the way to go. But honestly, I think subdivision mesh is still going to give you the best results. It's slower by a lot, but it's definitely, if you're in a crunch, I think this might be the way to go. And it's not that says you can't remesh this, you know, like 4 million faces or 5 million or 8 million, and then smooth every one of those edges down till they're like perfect almost. Nothing that says you can't do that. But this is more or less our high poly now. That's what I was getting at here with this whole process. It's nothing really that crazy. So like we got a high poly, we got a low poly. And if we align them, we can Alt A, use machine tools. They should line up just fine. I'm going to export the low real quick. Make sure it's all set up. Okay. We're going to export FBX low desktop. And I guess I already have some objects out here named this. So let's do it. Selected objects, object high. Didn't have to run through this one, unfortunately, and I messed up a few times, but so this was going to be high, and we'll do the other one as low real quick. So when you use machine tools, by the way, you can see the high still exporting. When you use machine tools to export with the Control S menu, right? And you do FBX export, it's doing selected object only. So I have the low selected and low, boom. I'm going to replace it instead of doing anything else. Let's go to Marmoset Toolbag. I think we've been waiting for this one, right? This is really where it starts. It becomes fun. Do big project, and big project we can use the quick loader. Grab the both of those. They should be named correctly, so it should just load them into high and low in a big project, right? And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and set, let's do 16x, 16-bit, 2048 is fine. That's what we were targeting. So we're going to do the ambient occlusion, the normal. We're going to bake these out to the desktop. And then we're going to have to click preview. Boom. All right. So baking in Marmoset is by far the fastest, most efficient way of baking, I would say. It just happens to deliver good results usually with minimal effort compared to some of the other stuff out there. But that's not to say that you won't ever want to go back and try using a cage in Marmoset either. Cages are really hard to set up in Blender. The more I played around with it, the more I realized that it's just not that much fun. But it's something you still can do if you really wanted to. But you're going to want to probably push around the cage manually, and you're going to be using triangles. It's not going to be that much fun, unfortunately, because you can't like lock the triangulation into place for whatever reason. So you lose all your control on the mesh. And then some of the software out there will let you lock the triangulation, but not Blender. So maybe there needs to be an add-on for that, but I think that's more hard-coded type stuff, perhaps. Anyway, so with that in mind, the best thing you can do when working with low poly mesh in Blender is if you need a cage, you still need a cage. You know, do it. If you want to try to bake in Blender, go for it. It's really not that great of an experience. This was almost automatic for the most part here. It's not always going to be like that, but this can be turned into a game model like this very fast. You can have a high, you can have a low poly. If we work that low poly and high poly a little bit better so we don't have just weird stuff like this going on, I think we would be okay with that area. But for the most part, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here that's pretty decent. You can see some of those edges do show up here, right? Like the little bumpiness of the edge, but it's so minimal. It's really hard to even really notice it, I think. And so if that's going to be an issue for you, just remesh higher, smooth it more. But for like a simple game prop, let's say this thing is on a table and the player never gets past looking at it at this up close, right? Like it's in the garage or something. It's just some kind of like, or it's in a science lab and somebody's working on robots or something. And you got to do dozens of objects like this, right? And make a little atlas set of them so that they can be scattered all over the lab. You see what I'm getting at? We don't need to worry about those little small discrepancies necessarily entirely, unless this thing's like right up in your face all the time. But if it's just a little bit further away on the table, you're working on an indie project, AA project, nobody cares. I'm telling you right now. Nobody will even probably notice that little detail there. Also, if it still bugs you or it really does bother you, there's always ZBrush. You know, if you need a better remesher, you need a better way of adding details to the surfaces. ZBrush is still a good workflow. You do block out or you do like your basic modeling in Blender, Maya, wherever. Take it to ZBrush, remesh it, sculpt on it, decimate it, bring it back, and then you can bake it later, right? That's a professional workflow a lot of people use. We skipped ZBrush part of it, and in lieu, we are making do with the remesher in Blender. And so choice is yours, right? What are you going to do? You know, go. And ZBrush, some people don't understand the full idea of ZBrush. ZBrush uses what's called like the Pixo or whatever. It's basically like similar to what Unreal Engine does with Nanite, kind of. And because of that reason, you can use lots and lots of triangles or quads or whatever you end up using. But Blender doesn't do that. So Blender is really not very performant when it comes to high resolution meshes usually. But ZBrush will just go and just keep going for as much memory as you have or CPU power for the most part. And you'll get better results out of it, period, than Blender sculpting. I know a lot of people are like saying like Blender sculpting is amazing, and it's not bad in a lot of ways. It's some cool stuff it does, and it's usable. It's like, for me, it's like a modeling tool extension of all the other modeling tools, right? It's usable. You can have fun with it, but it's just not that level as ZBrush, you know? I wish it was, but it wasn't. So the remesh things are a little bit sketchy in some ways, right? Using that sculpt mode remesh setup, but it delivers still. And that's the main thing. Like it does well enough. And that's what you can put to use. That's how you can make these into game models. It doesn't take too long to process them. If I didn't sit here and have to explain everything, we're only at 45 minutes. I probably could have done that in about 30 minutes, maybe. It wouldn't have been that much faster, but it's still faster. That's the main idea. So, nonetheless, hopefully that helps you out quite a bit. One thing I do want to mention, though, before we go, is that a lot of times these high poly models, they're too dense. They're too many faces, right? If you're going to decimate things, you usually decimate in small amounts till you get to a certain point. So you want to do like 0.5, and then maybe the next time do 0.8, and then 0.8, 0.8, and you stack decimates on top of each other. If you take things too far, I'm just going to take this one down to 0.2 real quick. Okay. I just want to show you something here. If you have to decimate to bake, because you got a lot of things you got to bake and triangles are getting out of control or something, you don't want to create errors in your mesh. That will be noticeable in the bake. So as soon as it's done calculating, you can see this gets slow. This is why I don't like using the modifiers. They use like single cores or something like that. And for whatever reason, it's just really slow. All right. So yeah, we got some errors. You see these things? These will show up if you have glossy, metallic, like metallic or non-metallic glossy surfaces. These like stretched out triangle looking things, they will absolutely show up in your normal maps. So when you're looking at an object like this and you have, I don't know which material it is, probably this one. Yeah. If it's really reflective and metallic, change the sky. And I forgot what button it is. It's, yeah, that one. Okay. Let's use this one. Oh no, we use this one. This is better. Okay. That kind of stuff will show up in your corners here, like this, right? You will actually see like that distortion. Maybe not that one in particular, but you will see this distortion on your edges or on your surfaces even when you do that. Because like all those little discrepancies we had on the edges, when this is pure metallic, you can actually see they kind of show up a little bit better as well. So usually when you preview things with metallic and a little bit glossier, a lot of times those little distortions come like straight to the front. You can start to see them a little bit better. And so if you shift right click, you can see clear as day. We got little pinching points. So just be careful with the remesh. Try to get it as smooth as possible without making it too soft, you know? And if you got to decimate, it's fine to decimate, but don't try to maybe go as far as you think you need to go. Because right now this is, what are we at here? Not less than 1 million triangles. So that's not too bad. You could probably bake this just fine for the most part. Like if you had a bigger scene with multiple objects, you probably still get away with this for a bit. But yeah, you'll have to play around with it, get used to working with it, find your limitations, because your hardware is different than my hardware. Whatever ends up happening on your system, you know, you pivot accordingly. You know, if you can't do super high resolution meshes, then maybe go with mid poly workflows or go with low polys that are diffuse texture workflow. There's still people that buy that stuff out there, right? You can make money all over the place if you're really worried about making money. It's just you just got to get out there and do it, do the work. And learning's great. I'm going to make another video, I think, pretty soon talking about this, where some guys get addicted to learning and not doing, and you really need to get addicted to doing, not learning, right? So like this, if this is all new to you, that's great. You learned something. But if you've been seen this process before, you heard it in another video, and you've seen it again, you watch the whole thing, maybe it helps you some. Hopefully you move on to just working though, you know, not just watching YouTube. I think that's the best thing. And anyways, I'll make more videos talking about other random stuff like that and more techniques and stuff into the future. All right. We got a lot of stuff to get into. I got to brush up on Unreal Engine. Apparently I am way out of date on it. And I've been in Unity land for like the last 6 years for the most part. And before that I was in CryEngine. So I played around with like UDK back in the day, made some environments, and it was a lot of fun, but it's a lot has really changed. I've been trying to stay up on it a little bit, but I am definitely behind the curve on it right now. So I got to get my own self studying, watching some YouTube videos on it. Get caught up, I think, right? And with that in mind, see you in the next one. All right. Take care.